Welcome to Drink Coffee, Do Cool Stuff. This is a podcast about living with purpose, leading with courage, and doing work that actually matters. I'm Jason Elrod. I've spent decades leading teams, writing, speaking, and learning what it really means to live like your choices matter. Whether you're grinding at work, chasing a dream, or just trying to figure it out, you're in the right place. Here, we explore the tools, ideas, and stories that help you lead with courage, live with purpose, and build a life that matters. Welcome back to Drink Coffee, Do Cool Stuff. I'm Jason Elrod, Executive Leader, Strategic Advisor, author, and founder of Limitless Cyber. Today's conversation is about something most organizations still struggle to get right: human behavior. Because despite all the technology, platforms, tools, and investments we make in cybersecurity, most security failures come down to people, culture, communication, and leadership. My guest today is Heather Stratford, entrepreneur, founder, and cybersecurity leader focused on changing how organizations think about security awareness and behavioral change. We talk about why most security training still fails, why compliance does not equal culture, how leadership shapes security behavior, and why resilience ultimately depends on whether people understand why something matters. This conversation also goes well beyond cybersecurity. We get into entrepreneurship, discipline, risk, consistency, and the reality that meaningful outcomes usually come from boring fundamentals repeated over time. I think there's a lot here for leaders, builders, founders, and anyone trying to create lasting change inside of an organization. So grab a coffee and let's get into it. All right. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I think this is going to be a great conversation. So I want to jump straight into it. You have built companies around cybersecurity training.
Yes.
I'm going to say most training still doesn't work. What do you see that made you say the entire model is broken and I want to fix this?
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment for me because I was running a cybersecurity firm. We were into large enterprise clients, and I was reselling some of the popular types of platforms out there, the know-befores of the world. I was a national reseller. I had big clients that were government and private. And what I was noticing is it was not working, and it didn't work. It was just like, here's something, you have to have it, push it out. But when you looked at the actual results, I was like, this doesn't work. And so I started with the first layer, and I sent my information and my ideas to these different platforms. And I said, you need to fix this and you need to do this. And I started giving a lot of input, and they didn't really want to hear it.
Okay.
They weren't built that way. And they didn't want to hear what was wrong and how to fix it. They just wanted to sell what they had. And so I decided to pivot and launch Drip 7. So DRIP and the number 7.com. And Drip 7 is all about small amounts of information. So drip is a small amount of information, and 7, you really have to hear something 7 times before you internalize it and you start to use it. So Drip 7 is about behavior change. And what cybersecurity awareness training platforms were not getting is that checking the box and doing an hour or 2-hour training once a year, yes, it filled the compliance. No, it did not change behavior. And so I started to really dive into what's going to change behavior. And that's how I pivoted to developing what we have developed.
I want to double click on that because that's where the rubber hits the road. It's people and it's their behavior and it's their psychology around this. And I love that you called it out because I think a lot of security training is security theater and really just a check the box type of thing. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about the behavioral change. You mentioned it takes 7 times to really develop that habit or maybe shift a methodology. What else is behind that? What else have you found that actually is the difference that makes the difference in changing behavior.
Yeah. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
We wanted to move into an industry that is notoriously difficult and doesn't like training. So we moved into a large industrial metal manufacturer, and they wanted to train both office and floor staff. So we're talking about crusty, old, I've done everything, don't tell me, I know it. And I said, well, if it can work in this environment, it can work almost anywhere. And so we set up a test. We set up surveys at the beginning. We ran them through training for 2 to 3 months. We did surveys at the end to say, okay, for this environment, what can we do to actually change behavior? And it was amazing because they were all in to tell me what they thought. And at the end, when you looked at the surveys, they said things like, that they shared it with people at home. We asked them very specifically, did you share any information during this month with people at home? And when 85 to 90% of them said, absolutely, I learned something and I shared it with my family members, all of a sudden you start to realize that they learned enough and they recognized that it was important enough that they were starting to be evangelists of it. That's a big shift. That's a big shift from a compliance checkbox. So the question is, how did we do that?
Yeah, how?
How, the how behind it. And
Right.
the how is breaking it up into smaller bite-sized chunks where people are starting to think about it just a little bit each day or each week and not give them too much at once. We also do the why. Why are we making you do a long password? And when they start to realize, oh, that's why, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I could do that. So understanding the why and then breaking it up and then gamifying it so that it's not boring. It's not watching the same PowerPoint and the same person talking over and over again. Nobody wants that. I literally talk to people who are pushing out cybersecurity and are watching it and running programs. They said, I want to poke my own eyes out. I hate it. Okay.
You've heard some of my educational videos, I take it.
Right. Tell me how you really feel about this. People are very visceral. They look at it and they say, I hate it. I hate it. So we show them a different way. And they're like, oh, I can wrap my head around this. I like this. This works for me. And let me add one extra layer to that. Making it very job role specific or specific to the organization rather than generic is huge. So when people say, this is some weird off the shelf, I have to take it, they dismiss it. They don't care about it. They hate it. When you actually help them be better and understand and make it very specific to what they need, they appreciate it and it becomes a positive, not a negative.
I love that. There's so many, everybody listen, there's so many sneaky tricks going on here. But I'll start with the bite-sized logic budget block there, bite-sized component.
Yes.
Folks don't have a lot of time. Folks don't want to spend a lot of time unless they think something is important. And oftentimes, cybersecurity training, even though I love it myself, can sometimes be seen as a burden and not a benefit. And so that smaller chunk becomes way more consumable. So I love that. And you mentioned something that I often say. When somebody owns it, they're going to actually be accountable for it and responsible for it and actually change and shift their behavior. I tell people all the time, I don't want people to listen to me. I want to hear my words out of somebody else's mouth. And that doesn't happen until those, hey, how? You have to, how you do this, but until that big why. And you mentioned that. And this is key to both cultural change and behavioral change and organizational change, personal change, because that big why gives you that purpose, that attachment to purpose. And I love that people take the information and then generalize it and bring it out into their personal lives. because the fact of the matter is we're all the front line nowadays. Our threat landscape is us. It's everybody. And so the more we can get out there and do that, I think that's fantastic.
There was a period of time where I was really thinking about how do we make it better? How do we change it? And it didn't come all at once. I was starting to study how cultural changes were happening in businesses. And I went back to a very old format that some people on your podcast are going to recognize. And that is the Deming method.
Okay.
That was put into Japan
Yep.
to help manufacturing. And
Yep.
when you look at the stages that they rolled out and what they did, they had meetings where you would have how many days we were safe on the floor, and they had visual reminders, and they started to do all these things. The Deming method, actually taking little pieces of that, how did they make the cultural change, and then pulling it forward to IT, pulling it forward to, okay, different environment, slightly different, but the core is all the same. And so we replicated a lot of that. And it's worked in many industries. It's just we're adapting it for technology.
Where do you see leadership, and I'm going to say unintentionally, making this problem worse? How are they making it friction full versus frictionless when you engage organizations?
I think the biggest thing from a leadership perspective is some leaders say, okay, yes, do this. And they sign off on it. They say, okay, approve a purchase or a PO, but they haven't bought off on it. And so part of how you make cultural change and a shift, especially in cybersecurity, is understanding that the leadership is actually on board, that the leadership is doing it too. It's walking the walk. You have to make sure they're doing it too. So when you have a leaderboard and you have department against department and vice presidents and people high up in an organization and they're doing it too, all of a sudden it's, oh, they're supporting this. This is real. This is top down. Now it can be bottom up too, but I have customers who have their leadership say, yeah, we want to do this. And then they push it to a department and they're like, you run it, you push it out. And they're not quite as successful as when they own it and they're like, no, I'm on the leaderboards too. And if I'm showing up, how come you're not showing up?
Yeah, I like that. Do what I say, not what I do. Works really well. Versus that's more authority through mandate. Do it because I said so. That's not.
Well, that's right. And some organizations are built like that. I said it, push it down, make it happen.
Yeah.
But the way to change culture and a healthier culture is to say, we all understand this is important and we're all part of the security team. And it doesn't matter if you're on the front desk answering phones, if you're in facilities, if you are an educator, a doctor, senior leadership, we're all part of that team. And I'll tell you, every IT team out there would say, yes, I want everybody to get this. I want them to raise their hand and say, I'm part of the security team. And that takes a cultural shift.
I think that's really what we're talking about. How do we shift cultures? Mm-hmm. And part of what you mentioned there, some organizations are really top down, authority driven. I'll say military is a good example. I'll just pick one. Do what you're told by the general. On down, you have to do it. But just because that's the established power structure within an organization, I don't think it equates to leadership, because I think those are different words. And you tapped on what leadership is, not just management. So if I've got mandate through authority, like I'm the general and you're the private, boom, just you have to do it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change the heart and mind, which is culture, of the individual. And I think that when you look across organizations and you want to have that kind of security first mindset, or the privacy and compliance or resilience mindset first and foremost, everybody has to have that ownership. Again, why? Why should I care? Isn't that your job? And I think true leadership can be owned by anybody in the organization, regardless of title. But it's influence without that mandate. I could be the general and still have leadership quality and still have influence regardless of the mandate. So could that, the first person in the room, they could have more leadership impact in an organization because of their influence. And so I'm going to pivot a little bit to here, changing culture. Now, before you started your current company, as a founder, you have another company. You're a multi-founder. What did you find? Why did you start that other company? Why did you get into cybersecurity in that other company first? And what was your mindset? And I'm going to come back to the culture thing on this about that. But what was your mindset with that other company? Why were you involved with that?
I've actually started 7 or 8 different companies. Some of them I'm still running, and some of them I sold and I did a successful exit, and some of them wrong partner, wrong time. Nope, we need to get out of this one. So different stories depending on what it was. The predecessor to Drip 7, the parent company, was Stronger International. I also was an owner and started that company. It was a national cybersecurity firm. We had clients from coast to coast and in Canada. We were more of a value-added reseller in terms of everything from penetration testing and different things. But I think your question is more why.
Why?
And it goes back to, people have asked me, why cybersecurity, for one? Why technology? I don't fit the typical. I'm a little outside the typical box. I don't have a computer science degree. I didn't come in from that direction. I think about things a little differently. I'm a female founder in a very technical area. And yet what I see, and this is a lot of my why, is I believe that technology can solve problems. Okay. And you have to have a multifaceted team and perspective to understand how to best solve those problems. And I like to solve them. I like to go in and say, what's your main pain point? What's the problem here? What can we do to fix this? Now, you could flip that and say technology creates a bunch of problems too. Because when we layer 15 different softwares on top of each other, all of a sudden we have a real problem, because we've decided, without full integration and without really thinking about it, we've created a bunch of problems. But I believe that technology can help us. It can improve our lives. And I'm always fascinated with people who are going after and attacking hard problems. Problems like, how are we going to solve enough electricity and enough power? How are we going to clean up the oceans? These are really big problems out there. When I looked at cybersecurity, I looked at, we can fix this a little bit and we fix that. But what I saw was the biggest problem in cybersecurity was the people and the people side of the equation. And most of the people I was talking to, especially 5-6 years ago, they're like, oh yeah, that's a big problem. We don't want to solve that. Like, people were staying away from the hardest part of the equation. And I'm like, why? We got to fix that side. And for some reason, I like hard problems, because I decided to go into it full force and say, let's fix the people side of cybersecurity, because there's different numbers, 75, 80, 90% of cybersecurity breaches can be traced back to human error. And so it is a people problem. It is not a hardware problem.
So I think I know the answer to this question. You've been a founder multiple times over. You've built multiple companies. And I'm going to say, in that whole course of your experience, and I'm guessing which way you're going to answer, but what's been harder? Because you're going to have big, hard questions here. Building the tech or changing how people think?
I think, I don't know, they're both hard in different ways. I'm not sure that they're opposite each other. Building a company, you can build a manufacturing company, you can build a service industry, you can build lots of things. And there are different pieces of the puzzle that are hard.
Right.
Getting the right people on the bus is important. Making sure you understand the problem you're solving and not all over the board. And making sure that you're focused on that problem and who the customer is. And once you start to nail down those basics, then I think it falls into place.
Okay. Have you always had this bent? I've had people ask me, I've been in cybersecurity and technology for a hot minute, we'll just say that. And I often say, hey, I wish I could say it was inspiration that made me do it, but often it was desperation because nobody else was doing it. And there was this hard problem I was presented with. So there was nobody else around. I had to step in and do the roles. And that's really why I'm in cybersecurity. I was in maybe 25, 30 years ago that I was tilting towards that. It was because it was not inspiration. I was not like, hey, this is the next great big thing. It was, oh my gosh, how do I solve this thing? Ouch, ouch, it hurts, get it off. And trying to move that. But over the years, I know I personally have had to shift the mindset there in that spot. Now, and what you're talking about is getting the right people in the right place at the right time to make this change, because it's all hard in its own measure. In that, in order to get those building blocks in place, how did you personally have to shift your mindset as a leader from, say, company one to company now to really get those building blocks you just mentioned in place appropriately? So it's, I'm going to say, less frictionful nowadays versus when you were first starting.
Yeah, I will say I fell into being an entrepreneur out of necessity.
Okay.
And some people say, why did you start your first company? And I look back and I'll say, I had one on the side and I started dabbling and I started reading books about what the difference between just being an employee and how to, grow individually, but also grow your profession and grow your wealth, et cetera. And so I started reading and thinking. And so I dabbled a little bit. And then I ended up moving across the country. I was married to somebody who was going into a residency. I left a Fortune 500 company with a very good national position where I was growing and moving up and making money. And I ended up in a city I didn't know, not a lot of contacts. I was interviewing and I'd almost get it. And then I realized that it was an East Coast city. I had 2 young children at the time and a husband that was going through residency. And they wanted 80 hours a week. And I looked at that and I said, this equation doesn't work because something will give. And at that point, I made a very dramatic shift and said, I'm going to build a company. I'm going to do it on my own. Now, I had industry contacts and I was a national speaker and I had some other things going for me, but I literally said, I'm not going to do any more job interviews. I'm just going to build something. And I remember at the time, I told my now ex-husband, and he's like, you're going to what? He's okay. And he was so tired. He's, I got to go to sleep. I'm not sure I heard what you said, but okay. And I did. And and I hit it hard and I was pretty successful early on. And that gave me a taste for what could be possible.
Okay. That's interesting. So there's a lot of folks nowadays who the job market's not the best for them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of struggles out there. COVID didn't do us any favors about really pushing people away from, I'm going to say, developing the relational capital sometimes you need in order to be able to get out there. What would you say to those folks right now about starting a company? Because that's a big leap. But the point you're making there is basically, I'm going to say you can spit against the wind, and the wind's just going to be the wind, and you're going to end up not in a great spot if you continue doing it again and again. It might ask you for more than you probably can give it, from the standpoint of like going looking for a job. I'm looking for a job. And I'm looking for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months now, because I might have had something, but that's gone. Now I've essentially moved logically or physically to another space where I don't have those references. I don't have that infrastructure. I don't have that sort of like career on rails associated with me. What do you think about those folks? Is there an opportunity here where people should maybe take a look at that?
I think absolutely, but there's some caveats to that. Okay. So I have a son right now who's looking for the perfect job in the industry he wants, in the role he wants.
Right.
And it's tough. And he's been looking for a while. And he's been dabbling and doing side work. And people call it a side hustle. People call it, your side business, extra money. Not everybody is cut out for it. There are people who will try it and they will fail. And the reason is because you have to be really organized and really disciplined. You have to understand what you're good at and also be able to put in a lot of hard work to get maybe to that level you could be at if you were just an employee. So you have to be willing to put in that work. Now, for me, at the time and persistently over several companies, I ended up with 3 boys, and then I remarried and had 2 girls, so 5 kids, husband, family, taking care of an elderly, both parents. The family came first.
Yeah.
What I discovered as being an entrepreneur is I could dictate my time. And that meant I could work early, I could work late, I could make a doctor's appointment, and then I could finish off my day later in the day. So for me, being an entrepreneur became a really good path because I had the skill set, I had the drive for it. And I chose, rather than the traditional path, I wanted something different that was much more flexible. And I will say nowadays, people work from home and it's much more flexible. But 20 years ago, for a woman going into a VP level, it was not.
Yeah. And I like that you called out the paradox there. You have to be motivated. You have to be disciplined. You have to get after it every day so you can have the flexibility and the freedom to live your life in the right measure. And I think that's sometimes we're like, I just want freedom. Freedom, unfortunately, comes from a lot of this like boring, disciplined consistency.
Yes.
And I think that's a phenomenal message. Feel like I would love that. You know what's behind that whole foundation of that consistency and that push and that drive.
And we're talking about this from a theoretical point of view, but it's very visual when people talk about that guy's really in shape. Like, I want to run a 5K and I want to do it in 18 minutes, or I want to have muscles and be really fit. And they look at that other person and they're like, I want to be that. And yet they go to the gym in January for 3 times. And then they're like, yeah. And then February, maybe once, and then they're done. Like, it takes the discipline. We see it in people's physical if they're building muscle or running or doing something like that. It's a very visual to the discipline. When we're doing it in an entrepreneurial or a business format, you don't see it. You don't see that every day, but it has to be there.
It's the boring stuff, the boring basic stuff that really drives the foundation of that pyramid of success. Most people see this at the top of the pyramid. Oh, just the result. You're so lucky. You're just doing it all right. You do everything right all the time. Yeah, like that happens. And the question around like physical health, everybody wants a shortcut. What's the shortcut? What's the magic pill? What's the process what gym should I go to? What shake should I drink today? What pill or injection do I need? That's going to be my magic pill. And then tomorrow, everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to have the result you have. And I hate it makes my mind explode a little bit, because you know what the best thing you can do to have good health and be in shape is, you know what? Sleep. Get some good sleep at night. Move. You don't have to move. Just move. Just don't sit around all day. Go walk 3 or 4 times a day and watch your food. Those are the boring basics that people like, yeah, but what's the secret pill? What's the secret? That's the secret. But the boring, basic, foundational things that are so core.
They are core. They are absolutely core. And it goes into every facet of your life. You want to be healthy, there's core things you have to do. You want a really strong relationship with a significant other or a spouse, there are basic things you have to do, right? If you want a business that's going to be really successful, there are really core basic things that you have to do. I don't love going through my P&Ls and talking to the accountants and saying, okay, why did this go up? Why did that go up? There are some parts of the business that I look at and I'm like, this is not my favorite part of the business. But I could also say in the gym, this is not my favorite exercise, but I still know I need to do it because I understand the why behind it.
Yeah. And I love that big pull. If you're attached to purpose, the big why, right? It's easier to consume the discipline required to do something versus motivation. Everybody can be motivated, and motivation is like this great sprint to get you going to something. But you know what? Now that you're on the racetrack, motivation does not win you that race. Motivation does not help you finish that race, no matter what it is. Relationships, spiritually, mentally, physically, in a career, it just gets you there. And then it's like a fun friend that gets you to go out and do things, but there's nowhere near when you actually need to can you help me move? Oh no, that's not my thing. I got you excited about the apartment. My job wasn't not to help you move. And I love the component, those patterns. There are patterns of success, and they tend to be boring. They tend to be not necessarily the things we love to do. We could have certain parts about it. And I think the other thing here is they tend to be free. The things that can I buy something
yeah, we actually want to pay for it. We want the magic pill. We want a doctor to say, just do ABC, but they do tend to be free. It's interesting because I've been on a lot of podcasts that focused on women who have gone into leadership or IT. And they've asked me questions like, what in your foundation made you go this direction? What were the pieces? And there's been a lot of things in the news recently about women in sports. And I used to say, I played sports. I was the little girl on the boys' soccer team because we didn't have enough girls to have a girls' soccer team or league. And that was okay. I was the little girl on the soccer team. And I moved fast forward, and I was a soccer coach to all my boys going through soccer. But I would look out at the fields and I would see all these girls teams. And I'm like, man, I wish I was like, it's empowering. I'm like, yay, we've done so much good. Look at all those girls teams out there, because I didn't have that. But what I did have is parents who were like, yeah, you want to be on the soccer team? Great. So I was in a lot of sports. Now it could be running or wrestling or whatever it happens to be. But I think it's a great way to understand and learn about discipline. If I'm going to be a good wrestler, if I'm going to be a really good hockey player, or whatever you pick, it takes time. It takes you repeatedly showing up, being tired, and still going to practice. Yep. And that pulls you forward into a business world where it's the same thing. It's just a lot less glamorous.
Everybody's like, yay, I won the meeting. You know,
you don't get the jersey and you don't get the cool teammates and stuff. But that's why a lot of people, pro football players and other really disciplined, high performing sports people, are very good in business because they pull through those things that help them, and it translates 100%.
Yep. And I think sports, I love them. That is the way to go. I was a soccer player, swimming teams, or those kind of things. They tend to be, I think it develops that you don't want to do it. You embrace the suck. And, and then on those game days, or even on practice days, or in part of the discipline, you're building the relationships with folk around you too. You're building a relationship with yourself and your physicality, what you can and can't do. You learn those lessons. I got to run another mile. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have mouthed off to the coach. Yeah. And then you go, okay, but then you've learned you can run another mile in there. And I think that is that discipline that it's again and again. I'll let somebody else. I see the same sort of grit in people who grew up on farms.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. 100%. And I grew up in a high school that was more of a rural high school. And my track coach said, any farm kid, you're on immediately. And I'm like, what's this? You love the farm kids? And he's, because they have certain qualities. They've already done a lot of that. So it does translate. I also think that risk,
yeah,
that plays into sports as well. So you realize that you're a soccer player, you're going to come up the side, you're going to pass the ball, you take a risk, you don't know if it's going to work out. Maybe you don't make it, maybe you do make it, but you start to really fine tune calculated risk. And hey, I've done this, I'm going to pass the guy on the outside. There's all kinds of risk calculations. And business as an entrepreneur is all about, educated, calculated risk.
Yeah.
Do we have enough of this? Are we prepared? Are we going after the right market? You start to say, yep, we know there's a little risk over here, but it's okay. We understand what that risk is. We're going to try it anyways. So we've done our preparation. We've done our background research. We understand what the risk is. We're still willing to move forward. Or we pull back and we're not ready for this. We're going to wait till next season. We just haven't mastered it well enough to move forward with this. So I think it really starts to develop that muscle of understanding and being willing to take risks, and then being okay with not succeeding all the time.
Yes. That's the book I never want anybody to read. Here's my book, How I Succeeded in Life by Never Ever Making a Mistake and Always Being Right All the Time. Yeah. That's the one book that I recommend people, you give it to your enemy or you burn it. That's the one book you get to burn, because that's never going to be a space. And I love that you called out that the sports and the discipline of doing these kind of things, it teaches you about risk tolerance, risk resiliency, because sometimes you're going to go on that outside and I'm sorry, that fullback just lays you out. Been there, taken that hit. That slide tackle did not feel good. And I'm like, that really didn't work out. And then you learn you can get back up. So there's a resiliency factor that gets built in there as well. Not every business decision is perfect or is going to play out exactly as we think it's going to play out. And I love that call out. I haven't had anybody call that one out too, but the involvement in sports is actually, it develops that risk management muscle. And I think that's a clutch, very key distinction there.
And you and I are more in the cybersecurity world.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we're in the space that people said, you have to be 100% perfect all the time. You have to block every single thing and be perfect. And you step back and you look at it and you're like, what other area? I want to be a meteorologist, right?
Isn't that the job? That
60% of the time. And I still have a job and everybody still watches me and still thinks I'm doing my job. Cybersecurity is 100%. We want you to be perfect. And what you have to realize is that there are going to be mistakes. How fast can you learn from it? How fast can you plug that hole? How fast can you, right? So it's a very different subset of business. Everybody else gets to try things. Everybody else, it's okay if you failed. And it's like cybersecurity. You're like, we tried it. It failed. And everybody's like, you can't fail. Your team cannot fail.
It is a consequence career. That's what I tell folks. It's a career of consequence. It's a consequence career, not a career of consequence. It may have consequence, but it is a consequence career. And 99% of your success is invisible. Your success metric is invisible. And so you tend to be judged only when it failed, even if it's I'm 99.999, three nines percent then. Well, that 0.001 is how you're often judged.
Yeah, it's reverse of most all other industries and all other areas where it's the negative. I often go into, let's say, a big sales call with an enterprise, and they're like, "Can you prove the ROI on your software?" And I looked at them and I'm like, "So you want me to prove a negative?
Exactly. It's
Tell you
proving the
how
negative.
much
I was going to
your
mention that.
organization hypothetically will save because you didn't have something happen, right? Like the variables, can you make assumptions and can you put a number to it? Yes. And I have done that. But we all know that we're making assumptions
Yeah.
and we don't know. And so you're asking me to quantify a negative.
Today, I use ROI, and I have two versions of that. So it's risk reduction on investment.
Mm-hmm.
I try to say here's because honestly, my job at a multi-billion-dollar healthcare system as a CISO is I'm an enterprise risk executive with a subject matter expertise in information security, cybersecurity, technical risk, some of these compliance areas. But at the end of the day, I'm a risk executive when I really put it on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to approach things like, here's the risk reduction on the investment. Or I've often pivoted to, here's resilience on investment, just ROI, if we're going to call it that. So how resilient are we? Because there's a NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST CSF for everybody listening here. And it goes with, you need to know, detect is like, what do you have? Protect, respond, recover. You need to identify first. You need to know everything you have. So it's identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and now govern, because there's now a new version, right? And everything has to be about protect. And I like to point, no, actually, you got to do your best effort with identifying everything. And your best effort, table stakes for protect. But the reality of an operational security program is you've got to be really good at detecting and responding and recovering. That is where the core focus of your program from a CISO standpoint, from a cybersecurity, that's where you need to focus, because everybody is vulnerable today, right now, during this call. Whenever you're listening to this podcast, you're vulnerable today. You just don't know it sometimes, because those are called 0 days.
Yeah.
And so you can't protect against it. You can't identify where it's at. You have to be razor sharp, detect, respond, recover.
And pulling back to one of the topics we covered and started with is people and cybersecurity awareness training.
Who does that, right? It's
right.
The
and
people.
Pulling it through to say, you need to help people understand the why, and you need to help people exercise it like a muscle, that it's not just once a year in the gym, that you're actually trying to pull it through much more consistently so that they can detect and respond, and the team then can recover fast.
Yeah. And it's such a human component there. And I love that, because I can't just go to the gym once in January and go, I'm done. I just can't protect things once, train once, teach once.
No.
You need the consistency. How do you feel about a lightning round?
I will try my best.
Let's do this. All right. Back to the cybersecurity training. What would you say biggest myth in cybersecurity training?
That you can be done. Like it's a forever. It's not a one and done.
I've got a master's in it. I don't need it anymore. I'm completely trained. Okay. Love that. Most underrated security control.
That's a hard one. It might be right now vendors. I just think that people are wide open on who is coming in and what platforms. So it's third parties and vendors.
Okay. Contractual at the beginning of that and know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One behavior every employee should adopt immediately.
Slowing down.
Okay. One behavior every leader should adopt immediately.
Listening more.
One thing every CISO should stop tolerating.
Employees that are complacent with their job and not trying to constantly look for improvement.
I like that. Complacency. No bueno. And hey, you know what? The podcast is called Drink Coffee, Do Cool Stuff. So coffee or tea, and what are you drinking when you're solving your hard problems?
I'm not really a coffee drinker. Sometimes herbal tea. And in the wintertime when it's cold, it's hot chocolate.
I like that. Mint or no mint, marshmallows or no marshmallows?
And no marshmallows, but dark chocolate, not.
Okay.
Yes.
Final question. I say security is a leadership test. So if security is ultimately a leadership test, what does passing that test look like when it comes to people? Since we talked so much about it.
We also talked about how it's 100%, but I think it's getting to the point where everybody in the organization, if you said who's on the cybersecurity team, and they would raise their hand and say, I am. That's a big bar. But if they all recognize they're part of that first line of defense, you've gone a long ways in accepting responsibility for their actions.
Love it. Heather, how can people get in touch with you or follow your work?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, drip7.com. I'm on Instagram. They can find me there, but Heather at drip7.com.
All right. Fantastic. I'll put a link to all your socials in the description there. Thank you very much for today. It's been an awesome pleasure.
It's been great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode of Drink Coffee, Do Cool Stuff. If something landed, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and keep showing up with purpose. A quick note before you go. Everything we talk about here is for your own reflection and growth. Nothing in this podcast is legal, medical, or mental health advice. I'm not a lawyer, doctor, or therapist. Just someone who's been down a few roads and wants to share what I've learned. Furthermore, everything shared here reflects personal experiences and opinions, not those of any employer or organization. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and keep building your version of a life that matters.